Welcome to What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 oldies but goodies. Today I'm your host, Phil, and with me as always, it's Davy. How are you doing, Davy?
Good. We're glad to have some old friends back in the fold here.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Some surprising friends that we
yeah,
didn't maybe expect to see back.
yeah, we're unfortunately not talking about awesome guests.
Oh, that would have been great.
Yeah, but we'll maybe get back to that. We're talking about cards, some
Yeah,
very exciting essentials pack. So
yeah.
yeah,
Truly essential cards. But we'll get there. We're champing at the bit to try and talk about these. But to give you some context before we dig in, just to know when we're talking about this, we are recording on pre-order day. Both the vampires and the starter set are also available for pre-order. So big drop of Warhammer Underworld stuff if you just can never get enough and need to blow all your money. Uh, you got
yeah,
three new releases on top of having Seraphon just a couple weeks ago.
yeah, and some undead dice if you want.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and dice, man. I don't.
the attack dice are pretty boss on those. The
Yeah,
defense dice are a little hard to read, and that's one of my pet peeves. Uh,
the dice are hard to read. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I know some of the times when I was playing in the same room as Amon, we were on the same team, and he would use those championship dice, which is a nice power move. But man, like unless I was like right next to the table, I'm like, I don't know what he rolled.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
just they were just super hard to read. Uh,
Those are the
so
like light green with white.
no, I think they were like, well, I don't know. Maybe color is sometimes subjective. They were kind of like see through yellow with white on them or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah.
that really yellow green light color. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, so, um, yeah, I would be often mystified. I'd have to watch like his reaction to see whether the dice were good or not. So, maybe my eyesight's just bad. Anyway, that's
Either
enough
way.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna break all that down. But we got some community shout outs. What do you got, Phil?
Yeah. So obviously there's tons of review articles out today and earlier this week as well. There are lots of vampire reviews. Um, feel free to go check those out. It's a lot of just breaking down the cards, which is always good to see when there's new stuff. But the article that I thought was most interesting since last time we recorded was from Set the Tempo blog,
Mm,
talking about warband choice and sort of breaking down some of the psychology of like how you choose warbands and like what the sort of strategy is there when you're trying to choose warbands. From obvious things like trying to play the meta to, mm, I guess, things that are more like you just want to stick to one warband forever. Like, some people are just diehard Fire Slayers fans, and they're just gonna play them until the end. Uh,
sure.
so I thought it was really interesting, different sort of article. So feel free to check that one out. Uh,
Yeah, Jazz and
you,
Mollog, for example, from
yeah,
our
yeah.
local.
I
So.
mean, rep and Mollog forever, never change. Um, do you have anything?
Um, so there is a couple things. So I believe you say it's Phwwooaarhammer,
Yeah.
uh, and he's picking up the torch for Call It Shadespire. So
Oh
for
man. Oh
yeah,
geez.
and he even got on the line uh, with Stephen Van to check in with him and be like, hey, like I'm thinking of doing this. Like, are you coming back anytime soon? So I thought that was a pretty cool nod. He knows where his inspiration is coming from, but it's this really cool thing. So he is picking a what he thinks might be a kind of overlooked card. And breaking it down. So I think this first article was against the wall, and really just kind
Mm-hmm.
of dive into a specific card and like, here's all the things it's that sort of, we talk about appreciating content that other people aren't doing. Like you said with Matt's Set the Tempo article was kind of a cool thing. There's a lot of energy being spent on new card reviews, and understandably, since there's so many new cards and products and warbands coming out. But I like the filling in the gaps around the edges. So
Yeah.
I was really excited. Call It Shades Bar is one of my all time favorites, and I hope it comes back at some point. I really appreciate Stephen Van's efforts to that effect. But this is great also. So recommend you go check it out. Phwwooaarhammer. Um, I think I found it with a link to the Discord. I will try to put it in the show notes too.
Awesome. Sounds good. Anything else?
Yeah, another one of my favorites, No Gitz, No Glory, came back with a Stalker's review, and he has some really nice, efficient reads. I really very much enjoy his humor. And then I think he pointed out something that I hadn't noticed, which is kind of cool, that they seem to give in the Starblood Stalkers uh, they, them, theirs pronouns, which is kind of a cool
Oh,
thing. Like, no need to gender them if you don't need to. So,
yeah.
um, hats off. Like
Never noticed that.
that was a good catch, and I appreciate that. And always glad to see an article coming out from there. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to say was Path to Glory. Those guys need to sleep for about a week based on how much how much content they had to put out. But that wasn't the original thing I was tagging. I kind of knew that was coming, and still want to give them a nod for that because it was amazing. But they released one of their end phases, and normally it's a Patreon exclusive content that they have after. So this is a way to kind of get a peek in and see
Mm,
what you have there. So you should give it a listen because it's really good. They got Tommy Conboy on there, and he is a master of the objective play. Was very excited about Starblood. I
I
think
can
that you
relate.
gave it a listen. Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sort of in the background. I was working and listening at the same time, but
sure.
some I probably missed a few things, but it definitely had some good insights. Kind of did a basically just like sort of a card by card rundown from what I can remember. Sort of what he ran recently with Starbloods and
Hmm.
some of the reasoning for it. So
Yeah, it's a really good conversation, and you should check it out. And if you enjoy it, you should. And you want more of that, you can always throw them some support and get on their Patreon and listen more. I'm not currently doing it, but I'm thinking about it after hearing that. That was pretty cool.
yeah,
Um, we got a lot to cover though. But
yeah.
what have you? I'm going to give you your moment in the sun here. What the heck is going on with you?
Seraphon feels so good. Feels so good. Been painting, building decks, playing games. Which is more hobby than I've probably done in the last year. But just very, very much inspired by the Seraphon and actually finally having them to play with. Haven't played a lot of games, but all the games I have played have gone exceedingly well, which has me nervous that I'm either just getting really lucky or that something else is going on. And then it's just, like so I need to play a few more games to see if that's going to continue to hold. But so far so good.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got to see a couple of yours, and they've been impressive. Just the sheer scoring volume of the Starblood is pretty spectacular.
yeah, I will say the speed package on Starblood is chef's kiss.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah, we were remarking about that. There's so many, sometimes you'll put that speed package, and of course we're talking about cover ground, gathered momentum,
And
some
winged
speed
death.
upgrades here and there, and then winged death, and they just have so much redundancy with that because they've got great base speed and some nice in-faction upgrades, and they
Yeah.
benefit from having those anyway. And ranged attacks make those all the easier because you don't have to finagle the positioning quite as much. So yeah, most
Yeah,
impressive.
very good. Uh what the heck is up with you, Davey? What have you been
Uh,
doing?
well, I've been road tripping with my kids, just me and the two of them. So I haven't been able to get as much in. I did get a league game in, kind of on a whim. Busted out Thundrix and had some fun with them.
Nice.
And mostly watching because again, like I've kind of not been in a position to really play much, but I've been able to do some viewing. So I've watched some of your games and then watched a bunch of video content. So um,
Awesome.
some of the different channels and streams out there. It's been fun. And this very morning, I was watching my teammates. This is my round to sit. I'm the backup player for a team that made the semifinals and the team championships. And uh, as of our recording right now, the series is tied 1-1, and the rubber match is happening right now in a brutal crushes mirror match, and Jimmy versus Benny. So some real titans throwing down with each other here. So
Yeah.
I've had to close Discord so that I don't get tempted to go take a peek. I'm giving you my undivided attention, listener. So here
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, it's kind of like when you turn off the TV when your favorite team is playing because you're worried you're going to jinx it. So
For sure.
yeah, so that's that. But although I haven't been playing as much, been doing a ton of thinking about the game and really enjoying that part of it too.
Nice. Nice. Always good. Well, should we get to our main topic?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So today we are, like we said, covering the new Essentials pack. These cards are, I mean, as the name implies, picked out as essential cards for all Underworlds players. There's 20 of each type of card. So you get 20 objectives, 20 ploys, and 20 upgrades. I don't say gambits because specifically it is just ploys.
Mm.
I think part of that is because they want this to be a simplified release, in the sense that if new players pick it up, they can use it with any warband. There's never going to be cards here that can't be used. So that's my guess. Not 100% sure about that. And these cards are also essential in the sense that they are never going to be rotated. We'll sort of talk implications of some of that when we talk about the specific cards. But I guess generally, it seems like a good idea to me, to have a solid set of cards that's always going to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Davey?
Yeah, I think it must have been pretty difficult to come up with this list. I mean, uh, and I can foresee a situation where, as interactions come and go, as the rest of the card pool changes, you may or may not have to restrict stuff or restrict or unrestrict stuff on this list.
Yeah.
I don't think anything jumped out to me that would need to be forsaken. That would feel like a mistake. But I don't think it's an error to have something on here that's restricted. Like restricted cards are part of the game.
Yeah.
So I think that's fine to have those in there. And it's kind of exciting. And I didn't realize until I saw the cards that I was like, man, this is a pretty big impact. Like going forward, you're always going to have access to these. That's kind of incredible to think about. And some of them we kind of would have thought that I think in the back of your heads, we always thought we'd have access to great strength or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other ones. It was the surprises in there, or the ones that you couldn't easily predict that were the most exciting to think about. But yeah. What was something else? There was the new layout and new art style. Did you
Yeah.
have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I guess first off, I was just a bit surprised when we first started seeing the cards from the starter set sort of being previewed, and they had this shockingly different layout. And it was
Yeah.
like, well, wait a minute. What's this? Where is
Yeah.
this coming from?
Yeah.
Um, I guess for people who don't have access to the actual cards or pictures of the cards, although I think they're generally pretty easy to find at this point, um, they have pretty much consolidated the glory. So they're just using numbers and a single pip now instead of like actually showing each marker for how many glory you score. So it's just a little
Mhm.
faster to read. It saves space at the bottom of the card. They've also eliminated a lot of the art around the edges of the card, which I have
Yeah.
to
You're talking like kind
imagine.
of the border art sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I have to imagine they're doing that just to make more room for text and then also the actual art itself, um, which the art now stretches from border to border,
Mm.
from the short length of the card. So you can get a much larger picture in there.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I'm pretty sure that it used to be that flavor text was put before rules text, if I'm remembering correctly. and I
Yep. Yep.
think that has now been flipped as well. So just makes
Honestly,
it,
I did not notice that, but that is 100% correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it just, again, it kind of just makes it faster to read, which, I mean, not that the old cards were hard to read, but it helps, I think, a little bit, streamlines
Sure.
things.
Yeah. I wonder if they didn't. I mean, I wonder if there's such a thing as like a. There must be like a ergonomics consultant or something you could get in. Like it just kind of
Yeah.
feels like they must have had somebody. Maybe there's like a technical editor or something that says, "Hey, look, like here's the things you want to keep in mind. Here's how you want to think about." Although, I mean, obviously, this is a company that's been publishing stuff for a long time, so they, I'm sure, have a lot of expertise in house and maybe thought about it a little harder and thought there's some different ways they could
Yeah.
present.
Yeah. I do
Um,
imagine, though, that, in that vein, they haven't been in the card game industry for very long. So
oh,
maybe
sure,
they
yeah,
did learn a few things there.
yeah. What's your overall? What you thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral on the change? What do you feel?
For the art, I mean, I think the new layout is pretty slick. I don't have any problem with it. I do like the increased size for the art on the cards. I think is something that I really appreciate. The rest of the changes, I could take it or leave it. I don't really need it to be changed, but I always appreciate larger art. I mean, the art
Sure.
is always pretty great on these cards, and having more room for it just seems like a good idea.
Yeah. For me, I feel like one of the things that I do particularly enjoy about the layout is you mentioned how you were saying there's only ploys in here, which is true, but they're all labeled Gambit dash ploy.
Oh, yeah.
Like every card is labeled with exactly what it is. So it's got its symbol that we're used to, the dagger or the gears for gambits or upgrades, or ploys or upgrades. But then it actually says what it is, and I feel like that's pretty important, as because I've taught it to a number of players, and that's one more confusing thing to try to remember what this particular symbol is or
True.
means. And so if you reduce some of the strain on a new player, they've got a ton to read and a ton to learn anyway. So um, that's pretty cool. I think it was a little jarring at first because I was so used to the old style, and
Yeah.
I love this game, so I've loved the cards as they've been. But once I got over kind of the initial, not even an initial negative reaction, it was just like an initial like
This
um,
is different.
yeah, like whoa, what's going on here? And I was like, no, actually, I think this makes sense. I like this. So
So, I mean, I think the obvious place to start here is just that a lot of the cards from the standard core sets, which we didn't see all of in Direchasm,
hmm
are all here.
hmm
Um, and so these are kind of your standard staples that came in the core boxes. So you'd have hold 1 through 5, you got supremacy, you got annihilation, you've got conquest and denial, and the cards that basically for the first 3 core boxes were just all repeats, like,
hmm
um which is just unnecessary,
hmm
which I have to imagine is a good part of why they're in here and not in a core box anymore, because
Sure. Yeah.
just add some flexibility in those boxes so you can branch out and do different things when you're releasing those boxes and make it a more appealing product for existing players.
Yeah, exactly. And as someone who's getting everything anyway, it's nice to be able to get even more new
Hmm.
things. I always liked kind of seeing like, okay, well, there's some mild interest in seeing like, what does supremacy look like this season, or
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
seeing the different objectives, or seeing, here's what the flavor text is about this kind of objective or whatever. Um, but I think this is great. Like if you asked me, that was kind of like a finding a silver lining, and this is getting new toys every year instead. So that is
Yeah,
cool.
definitely.
Uh, yeah. So that standard makes up hold 1 through 5, annihilation, conquest, and denial. So that's 8 of them accounted for. So that kind of leaves us with 12 that you might not have instantly predicted. Of those 12, what stood out to you?
So there was a number of things that stood out, though I think I'll start with just cards that I really didn't expect to see.
Mm,
Um, So some of the ones that I was surprised to see come back. Uh, so Great Gains is in here.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, whoa, all right, there's a staple card that has pretty much always was always with us until Nightfall rotated out. Um, it's just a nice, easy score. So like people were playing it pretty much constantly because scoring 5 glory in a round is not especially difficult. And then if you did, nobody could stop you from scoring that. And then there's two other ones that just really were surprises to me, and that was making a statement, which is hold all the objectives in an opponent's territory. For people who don't remember that one from Shadespire, um, it's considerably easier these days than it was in Shadespire. So, kind of an interesting card to have back.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pure Carnage was the other one, which is just at in an end phase there are seven or more fighters out of action, regardless
Yeah.
of warband. This is one I've
For
always loved because I played a lot of Reavers from
yeah,
Shadespire and Nightfall days. But
you and me both for 3 glory. Pretty nice to have like kind of a capstone card, especially for a warband like Reavers who may be kind of looking around and saying we're a little thin on the ground for objectives. So,
yeah, and I think
uh,
like even Gitz like that card a lot, which is I don't
sure.
know. It's like Swarm Warbands. It's like, oh, am I gonna lose most of my fighters? Well, here's 3 glory for having most of my guys be dead.
Yeah, I think right at this very moment where crushes are, kind of the bullies, crushes and Mollog maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this what's kind of nice is this is a aggro, because you generally wouldn't want to do it by just losing all seven, being your people dead.
Yeah,
Uh, so this is kind of aggro, but it doesn't benefit the small war bands who could take it, but then can't guarantee that they'll because if they go a 3 fighter versus 3 fighter,
yeah. It's
or
just not
three
even
versus
possible.
four, you very rare you're gonna have every fighter dead. Um, my special shout out to this card is that Karsus got to be the poster boy on it.
Yeah,
So little nod to the Reavers being that, and then even better, if you look carefully in the background, you can see all the bodies lying around. You see there's Blooded Saik, but there's also Grundon. So this was clearly pure carnage scored off of Godsworn Hunt versus Reavers, which is as it should be.
yeah. The bloodiest of conflicts.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody just dying. One I was pleasantly surprised to see and not really thinking of because it's still it's from Beastgrave. I think it's the one and only from Beastgrave. I think
It
you
is.
pointed out if we don't count any of the ones that are kind of repeats, is Path to Victory. So we know this is 2 glory. Did you take somebody out, or were one or more enemy fighters taken out of action in the preceding action phase? And does your warband hold 2 or more objectives? It is marked with dual, so that as templating is still in there, bolded. And what I love about this one is uh, it has both parts of the game. I mean, I guess there's more than just 2 parts of the game, but it has holding objectives and killing things. So you're having to play in multiple spheres, and I think it's a great one, and I think it's fine for that to have a really long life in the game.
Yeah, yeah. I was also surprised, but in a good way, to see this one. And like you say, I think this card is almost like one of the best designed end phase cards we've seen, where you have to be sort of playing in both realms, and it means that lots of people end up using it, but it also means that there's like not necessarily a push, but like there's an emphasis in good cards for playing flex, which I think helps the game stay away from passive play. And I know there's been endless debate about whether or not it's a good thing or not, and we don't need to get into that today, but I think most of the community probably is happier when their games involve some dice rolling. So
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, so great card for it. Um, I feel like we've been in a lot of end phases. There's a few juicy surges in here. You like any of these surges here?
oh yeah, I mean, Branching Fate is definitely one that I did not expect to see here again.
Yeah.
Sort of a weirdo from Night Vault that ended up becoming pretty consistently used just because when you're rolling 3 dice, so a lot of those range three sword type attacks, it's just a fairly reliable score. And for those who don't know, this is a surge where you score it on an attack action if you rolled 3 or more dice and all of the dice were different. Um, so, and I guess it's worth noting, you can score this on a defense roll as well. So if you're being attacked and you roll three
Mhm.
different dice, you can score this as well. Not going to come up as often, but it is still possible.
Yeah. And not to be the art guy, and maybe this is, I think it's, I think it's apophenia is where you see patterns where they aren't necessarily there, but they have the Briar Queen on here, and I've scored it a bunch with her in my day, like either with her attack or when you get a defensive upgrade on her,
Yeah.
scoring it defensively. So I was just that little bit of happy to see her on there. So
Yeah. Well, I'm sure lots of people were using this with ghosts back in the day.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
uh, it's a nice little callback. Is there a
Uh,
surge that jumped out at you?
Yeah, so we saw Strong Start come back. So Strong Start is one glory for uh, after the first fighter's taken out of action if it's an enemy fighter. I really like that. It's an aggro card, but it's a little bit of a gamble because it can only be you have kind of one opportunity to score it during the round.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also notable is the absence of martyred, where which was kind of the reverse, making sure that the first fighter out was your own. And I have to imagine the reason that's not here is because it made for some weird incentivizing, like diving
Yep.
Grawl into lava pits and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
didn't do that quite as much. I did enjoy it for things like, well, okay, I'll go. It would make it even better to go second, or it would cushion the blow of having to go second in those crucial second and third rounds sometimes. But I definitely get it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we know that when the suicide decks started to become a thing, that they clamped down on that pretty much right away. They're like,
sure,
this is
yeah,
not what we intended. Um, you shouldn't be getting glory for killing your own fighters. So,
yeah. That and no remorse are two objectives. No remorse is for knocking somebody out that has with an attack action that does more damage than they have wounds. Those two
mhm.
seem to particularly benefit the heavy hitters like Mollog and Crushes. So they didn't get nothing out of this, and we'll see that'll
Yeah.
continue to be the case later.
Yeah. I think we'll
Uh,
see that later on that they definitely didn't get nothing. Um, I think no remorse is an interesting one because it, I don't think we saw it a whole lot when it was around originally, but now that there's a lot of beefy fighters and a lot of ways to add damage, like there's probably what, like 5 or 6 easy to access +1 damage cards.
hmm
Um, like even killing wound 3 and 4 fighters, you could still score this sometime with depending on your warband. So,
Oh, for sure. Again,
uh,
with those big ones, or like Crushes the is it Ard Skull who can spend WOG tokens to boost his damage up.
yeah,
So
yep, that's probably why he's on the card art.
yeah, yeah. There it is again.
Yeah.
Um, it's like they thought about it. Uh, yeah. So it'd be. I think like this is the kind of card that maybe at this exact moment those kind of decks don't need because they have Surge of Aggression and they have
Hmm.
that sort of they have enough other cards that'll get there. But as those rotate out, then you maybe come back and look at this. Especially, all of these essentials are going to be more important at the beginning of each season as it comes around because that's when
Oh
the
yeah,
card pool will be at its smallest. So um, I think you can
for
almost think of
sure.
these in those terms as well as just at all times. So
Well, I think there's only one other surge that we haven't talked about yet,
that's true.
so might as well mention it. We get a Victorious Duel again. Um,
Yeah.
This is one that's been around a bit. It was reprinted in the gift pack, if I'm not mistaken.
It was, yeah.
Um, and so this is a surge where you score it if your leader takes an enemy leader out of action with an attack. Um, and you do get 2 glory, so it is a bigger reward. I don't think we see this one very often, but I think, again, talking about the bigger fighters benefiting here, like Mollog probably still likes Victorious Duel, um, and Crushes can probably pull it off without too much trouble as well. So
Rothgorn could be a fan.
yeah, yeah, it could be. Even Ripa, I guess, could probably
Sure.
get going there if he gets his upgrades. So um, a sort of a higher risk one, but a pretty big reward if you can pull it off.
Yeah. So, and I think the other role of cards that are permanently in the universal pool, there's in our day and age of excellent internet resources, there's a lot of ability to just kind of take a successful deck and grab it for your own. But that's not what everybody does. A lot of people will
Yeah.
build them for ourselves, and so for them to take some space for things like hold objective 1 through 5, which really are kind of the bottom of the barrel as far as uh, objectives you want to be taking. Although, there may be cards down the way that somehow unlock those. You can never
Yeah.
say never. But that, on the spectrum all the way up to uh, like this with Victorious Duel, where just seeing those cards, like I think you learn something by including those cards and then learning why they do or don't work.
Yep.
I
Definitely.
think they're important teaching tools. Some of these, so I think there's a lot of people who put Victorious Duel in because they have a strong leader. In the example here, you've got Scritch. I think is just kind of uh, dueling swordsman style, ran past each other and taken out Vasilak.
Yeah.
But so you might have a leader that you think is particularly powerful, and then discover that actually, like I get kills with the rest of my warband. I don't want to have to wait on this and have a brick, or maybe it does work for you. But I think a number of these are good teaching tools.
I would definitely agree. Are there any other of these end phases that you think are in that same vein, or just any that you want to talk about in general?
I think the last one I'd want to mention is they have the hold 1 2 and hold 3 4, also cards that got reprinted in the gift pack. I think this
Yeah.
is fine to have these permanently in. Right now, they suffer from how much disruption there is in the game.
Hmm.
But once maybe that rotates out, maybe these kind of come back into. I think it's nice to always have those in there. And then especially if you're in a play group with a smaller card pool, then any of these cards become more attractive. So I think they fit the bill what they're looking for. Here's some archetypes to think about.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it just keeps the baseline for hold objective play, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you're not just stuck with supremacy, which supremacy is probably right now almost impossible because people can see it coming, and then one distraction or any number of other things, and it's messed up, and that could be tough for newer players if that's all that they had to work with. So
Right.
definitely agree.
Should we move on to gambit ploys here?
Yeah, I think
Or
there's just only one objective we didn't actually talk about, so I'm just going to say it quick that plant a
yeah.
standard is now in here just sort of forever. Um, Not a particularly strong option, but it does give another whole objective choice. And
Hmm.
this is another one I think kind of flexes in and out for hold objective or aggro play. Um, so have your leader hold an objective in enemy territory in an end phase for 1 glory is a bit hard, but I think again it's one of those good learning tools.
Sure.
But yeah, let's dive into some gambits. Were there, as with the objectives, were there just sort of a standard set of things we expected to see here?
Uh, much smaller. I think everyone was expecting, was able to kind of predict that, um, predict the hold 1 through 5 supremacy.
Hmm.
Those objectives were almost certainly going to be here. I think if I tried to write down a list of what 20 gambits did I think were going to make it,
Yeah.
that list was much shorter. And even having a good idea, I think gambits were even harder than upgrades. Even having a good idea, still seeing some of these, it was almost shocking because you're like, oh yeah, like we could have at some point existed in a meta where this card was not available at all.
Yeah.
Um, Notably for me, I think sidestep, uh, confusion, and to a lesser extent determined effort. Um, but sidestep and confusion have been around for such a long time that I was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
I mean, they've been literally around since the very first Shadespire core set. And so when you saw like, oh, well, that would have been weird to be playing without sidestep as available.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, our very first episode was about push cards and about kind of the importance of that one hex. And I remember one of my very first learning things was uh, figuring out that I better put sidestep back in the deck because I kind of was like, I don't care about, I can move three. Why would I
Yeah.
want one more? That's one third of a like, So
Yeah.
I think that's those were. How about you? Was there any ones that you were like, yep, I was totally expecting that? Or
Yeah, those were the ones.
okay,
I mean, looking at the rest of the list here, just quick to make sure. Yeah, I don't think anything else I was expecting to be here. I guess one that maybe could have been expected but isn't here is distraction.
yeah, that's interesting. We have had briefly. We had at the start of Beastgrave a period in the meta where there was no distraction or distraction equivalent
Mhm.
before Nightmare in the Shadows came out, and before the gift pack came out. Um, I think that's cool. I think we may see distraction again. It may get reprinted and I think it's powerful enough, or reprinted by another name. Who knows?
Yeah,
Um, but I think that's okay. Um, I think it's a extremely powerful card, and I think when people have to pick between distraction or sidestep, generally they're picking distraction. Um,
I think so too.
for reasons we've discussed elsewhere. And so I think to have the slightly less powerful but still excellent one in this set is the right way to go.
Definitely agree.
Yeah,
I think there's lots of good reasons for it to not be here, and so well, it's interesting. I'm not sad to see it be a non-permanent addition to the game.
sure.
So I guess thinking about some of the strong cards that ended up in here. Um,
Hmm.
how about you kick us off with some that you thought were very strong ploys that ended up in here?
Well, yeah, man, there's a lot, and there's a lot that are not like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is in here. It's so broken. Why would they reprint it? It
Yeah,
was just like, oh great, here's a good one. Here's a cool one.
yeah,
So I would say, well, let's say Duel of Wits coming back.
yeah.
Reaction: play this after opponent plays a ploy. Draw two power cards. And notice it's ploy, so it still doesn't trigger off of spell gambits for what it's worth.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if we enter a meta where there's all of a sudden strong magic presence again, then this one will go down. But card draw, people really kind of open their eyes to just how powerful card draw is in the Beastgrave season. And now this is with us from here on out. I think it's fun because it sometimes ends with a mini game of like, I don't need to play this just yet, or sometimes you got dual wits in hand, so it's kind of clogging your hand. And you're like looking at the other player, like, come on, like play something.
Yeah.
Really,
Yep.
sure would like to replenish my hand a little bit. So, I wonder if they had to think a little bit about this or improvisation, which was the discard your hand and draw three.
Ooh.
Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Uh, man, I that card is so strong. There were a number of times where I was using that when I had no cards left in hand to
yeah,
just draw three.
yeah,
Or even if you had like a big hand of upgrades, uh, it could get you out of a really tight spot. Um, I think I really am glad that they went with Duel of Wits. I think that having some card draw is very good for the game. Having too much can end up being a bad thing. I think we're almost to that point right now.
hmm
Um, but generally, I think Duel of Wits is a nice sort of payoff. I guess Temporary Truce is maybe better balanced, but I think Duel of Wits is still a good one to have around.
Sure. Yeah, you have less control over when it happens, but
Hmm.
you 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 don't have to give your opponent one. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that was of the many that jumped out at me. That one was one. I'm gonna steal the initiative and go again here.
All right, do it.
As I think Lethal Ward is a big one.
Yeah.
So that's pick one objective token, deal one damage to any fighter in the same hex as that token. Some really cool things to think about this. So one, I think Worm Spatter, super excited to see more pings.
Yep.
I think even Dread Pageant are not displeased if they're trying to push for the Inspire because they've got one of these in house. So
Hmm.
if you can build redundancy, that makes it more powerful. I think as much as people like objectives right now, it's great, and it still has the wording where you can pick an objective where it's your fighter, so you can have some anti-primacy tech available with this, where you
Yeah.
can
Yep.
damage your own to try to deny a primacy grab if you're really going, or if you're really next leveling it, you're playing Reavers, killing your own guy to trigger Fueled by Slaughter and get free attack.
Who would do something like that?
uh, only me back when I could get martyred off it. So,
Yeah.
no,
uh,
not only me. I'm sure I got that from somebody else.
but
I don't want any
yeah.
angry messages telling me I'm stealing somebody's glory. So that's what daylight robbery is for.
Well, since you mentioned it,
Sure.
uh, that one is also in here again. Strangely enough, that's now been
Mhm.
printed. This is the third time, I think, right?
Yeah. Right.
Uh, Sort of an odd one to show up here, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been restricted. I, I don't. I mean, I never thought it really was that strong, but I guess in the situations where it works, it ends up being ridiculous in the early parts of the game.
Yeah.
'Cause it's like get a glory for playing a card, and then your opponent also loses a glory, so it ends up being a
Right.
2 glory swing. But it's one of
I
those fun control cards. So
yeah. Fun control, he says, and hundreds of listeners scream out in pain.
yeah,
Uh, no, I agree though. I like it for a number of reasons that I think is restricted for that. I think the objections are for people who think that it's kind of a negative player experience, but I don't. I'm not too fussed about that side of thing. I like it as the idea of it could be pretty choice in a Godsworn hunt deck, and anything that gives them a little bump is always nice for them
yeah,
to steal one and get an upgrade that they hadn't yet earned.
for sure. It's
I kind of
definitely
led you into that one, so I'll go ahead and pick one of your own choice. What do
all
you?
right. All right. I will pick another strong one since we were still trying to get through those. Not to say that it's not strong, but I do think that Mirror Move is one in here that is quite good. Got a lot of play back in the day. This is where you play it as a reaction to an opponent's push, and then you can push one of your fighters, or not specifically your fighters.
Yeah.
I should be more careful about how I say that. you're you're choosing another fighter and pushing them the same number of hexes.
Hmm.
Um, this is fun because it's just so flexible.
Yeah.
It's kind of a dealer's choice, sidestep or distraction reaction. And if you're facing somebody who does some of the weirder pushes where they can push 2 or 3 or more hexes, you
Yeah.
can suddenly get a crazy push for some other fighters.
Sure. And we know that Starblood and Grimwatch are still very much relevant in play, and they each have very important cards that push fighters too.
Yes.
Um, I remember using this card. It was real fun when somebody's getting ready to push two, and you're really trying to figure out the exact timing you want to use. Like when am I triggering this to have it go off just how I want it.
Yeah.
Um, I really like that one because you can see some spectacular plays with it. Um, like when you pull off something cool with it, and then you feel real happy, real proud of yourself. Or sometimes you'll be watching a game, someone does something really cool with it, and you're like, man, that was rad.
Some of those
So
galaxy brain moments where you're like, oh
exactly,
my
yeah.
God.
Speaking of galaxy brain moments, there's no time.
Oh, yeah.
uh, and that is the power cards cannot be played until after the next activation. We've talked about this in the past, but there's just you can use it at the end to make sure that you lock in a board state before you hit the end phase, which is cool.
Yep.
You can use it if you've been forced to go first in a round, and so you're having to take that activation where uh, you don't have the advantage of helping yourself with power cards. You can say, well, neither will you.
Hmm.
And it's also it'll block any reaction cards, um, not reactions written on upgrades or fighter cards, but it'll keep people from using. So if you are real worried about that brutal reprisal or furious reprisal or whatever reaction attack cards exist out there, or whatever,
Hmm.
even for narrow escape, you can drop this if you really are worried that or gosh, the list just keeps going on. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
Yep.
dread pageants, pass off damage. There's so many reactions that are real powerful. I don't know that makes it powerful enough to bring this card, but same like I was saying, like
Yeah.
when this card works, you feel like a genius, and sometimes you just play it and they're like, yeah, I didn't have anything I was going to play anyway. Cool,
Yeah.
cool, cool. Don't tell me that.
Yeah. And it's another control card. Like one of the hardest controls in the game, except for Frozen in Time, which, I mean, thank God that didn't come back. um, but I think it's good to see that they're putting stuff like that in the game. They want to keep it a part of the game, so definitely happy to see that one come back.
hmm There were two different segues I could have used off of Mirror Move. One was the Galaxy Brain. One was the Pushing Three or Pushing Weird. So
Yeah,
Pushing Weird, we got a couple of those actually.
it's true.
Um, I'll uh, I'll I'll throw out Commanding Stride. It's got Stormsire on this. When I first saw this, I dropped a monoline because the first time I really saw this card really being impressively used, he was using it in the Grand Clash finals to yo-yo charge his Stormsire. So he'd come running forward, fulminate, and then use it
Yeah,
to retreat back to a safe spot. And he made it onto the art. So I really like what they're doing with that. Yeah, a leader up to 3 hexes. I can think of some leaders that would really like this. It's got to go into a starting hex, but
hey, there's a lot of those.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Good stuff.
Yeah, just when you think you've got Molag locked down with, uh, you know, with a whatever a lead bone does or energy drain or something like that, then he commanding strides into a spot and starts wailing away again.
Oh, man.
The other wacky push, you want to take that one?
Sure. So this is like the one of the wackiest that we've ever had. So this is flickering step. Uh, so you roll 8 dice and choose a friendly fighter and push them up to a number of hexes equal to the number of crits that you rolled. So obviously John Winreese's favorite card in the world. Um,
Yeah,
but so
eight spaces every time.
yep, every time without fail. But I think realistically, what you are gonna see with this card is that odds are you're maybe rolling one. So although there's like this potential to have some crazy pushes, I personally don't ever remember using or liking this card very much, just because it's too inconsistent.
Sure.
Um, but if you need another sidestep, it is an option.
Yeah, I think we crunched the numbers on it, and it wasn't even as probable as we thought to even
It,
get that one. So
yeah, yeah. So an interesting one to come back. This might again be one of those learning lesson type cards where it's like,
yeah,
hey, here's a thing you can do, but maybe you
yeah,
shouldn't.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, well, gosh, let's keep it going with pushes because there's even more.
Oh yeah, actually, you're right.
Yeah, I think three more by my count. We got counter charge, so reaction play after an enemy fighter's move action that is part of a charge action. Choose one friendly fighter and push the chosen fighter up to 3 hexes. Chosen fighter must end this push adjacent to the enemy fighter. This is another
Oh
one of those
yeah.
that I think is good, and then it has some deceptively powerful uses. So especially with how many lethals are in the current environment, you have a fighter who's vulnerable to getting pushed into a lethal. Even the target of the charge can use this to run around to the other side of the fighter who's attacking them and get back there. It's good on fighters that have -1 for attacks that are adjacent. So maybe you're getting charged by somebody with a ranged attack, a range 2 or range 3. So they're trying to avoid that. You come back in. Um, it is good for somebody who wants to be adjacent for a counterattack. So crushes like this, so they can get in close and then brutal reprisal.
Yeah.
Or just boosting someone from your back line. And I think I saw Jonathan saying something similar. Like this was often for me an 11th gambit. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I can't quite get it in. And then somebody used it against me. I'm like, well, he just crushed my soul. So
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks for that.
So, oh yeah, how did I forget about this other push? So the other one, and I think, man, is this is the last one, or is there still another
No,
one?
there's one more.
Okay. Well, so their center of attention is
Yep.
back. This is probably one of the stronger ones that's in here.
Yeah.
So this has a weird FAQ. I don't remember what the FAQ said. Go look it up. But basically, the way it works is that you choose one fighter and then push all the other fighters that are within 2 hexes of that fighter up to 1 hex, but they have to end closer.
Yeah. I think the
So
confusion comes because it says up to 1 hex. So sometimes people are like, well, I'll push my fighter 0, but that doesn't get them closer. I think the
yeah,
language is in there. So if it's impossible to do, you
yeah,
you
yeah,
don't break the game state. Yeah.
and and I think also if you can't, like, a push doesn't count as a push if it's 0. So then there's also like some of that weirdness where
Yeah.
it's like you technically aren't pushing if you're pushing for 0. So I don't know. It's a little strange they didn't clean up the wording on the card on the new one, but either way, just know that it moves fighters 1 hexes closer. If you
Yeah.
haven't played with it before, but this is another one that has a lot of uses, and probably far more than even countercharge has. I think I think the defensive plays with it are some of the weirder ones that you maybe don't always expect,
Sure.
where you can like pull fighters out of position for making charges, or you can, uh, you know, pull fighters off of objectives, or you can pull your fighters back so that they're out of range from getting attacked, or
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just so much you can do with this card, and it's a great one. So happy to see it back, though definitely wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's another one that there's some pretty cool plays get set up. I was having some thoughts about trying to figure, is there like an optimum warband size for this? Like it helps in a big warband because you have more sort of center of attention nodes, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak,
Yeah,
to trigger this off of, as well as probably more disposable fighters. But then if your board is really crowded, you can really kind of disrupt your own positioning with this accidentally. So but yeah, and then art shout out. I thought this was genius. They've got Vasilak with all his warband just fawning over him.
yeah. I mean, it's so on the nose, right?
Yeah, I couldn't have picked better. Really happy about that one. The other push one is Inspired Command.
Oh
Choose one
yeah,
friendly fighter other than your leader and pick one. Push the chosen fighter 1 hex or give the chosen fighter 1 guard token. I really like this. I think your default is sidestep because universally useful, because often you are wanting to push your leader who's an important fighter, or there's always a possibility that your leader's dead because that's required in order to even be able to play this. But then the flexibility of being able to place a guard token, especially as powerful as a guard is, keeping you on objectives or keeping you safe from lethals, is really cool. So I think this can be in the conversation for a lot of decks of certain archetypes to include.
yeah, yeah. And I guess because this came out in the leader pack, and I think
Yeah,
it probably didn't get as much consideration at the time because giving a guard token wasn't as good back then because you could
right, for
still be
sure.
driven back while you were on guard at that time. So
100%.
yeah, this card got sort of a sneaky buff, and now
Yeah,
it's
that's a
just
really good
around.
point because it rotated out at the start of Beastgrave
The rules
when
changed. Yeah.
yeah, guard rules upgraded. Yeah, good call. Um, other inspired thing, inspired attack.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a nice little bump. So you have to choose a fighter. Well, you don't choose. So you give +1 dice and +1 damage to the first range 1. And I've forgotten about that part of this card a number of times. To the next attack action made by an inspired friendly fighter.
Yep.
Obviously, +1 dice and +1 damage is a lot. So in warbands that can easily inspire, this can be pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, especially for warbands that are really going to need to be able to go sort of hardcore aggro, I think they really like this card.
Yeah. This felt like a Godsworn Hunt staple for a long time because
Yeah.
not only like you do that 1-2 combo of upgrade a fighter, they inspire, they have that upgrade, and then you drop this on them, and they went from like a pretty pedestrian threat to like, holy cow, that guy's doing 5 damage on 3 hammers now. Like,
Yeah.
that
And
was always fun.
yeah, I mean, that cruise missile style of play works pretty well with inspired attack.
Yeah.
Um,
I like Arnold's ambition on this card here. I don't know if he's quite the cruise missile he thinks he is, but he's gonna have a go at Skaith. So.
Yeah. Even inspired, he's not. I mean, I guess if he rolls a crit, he could get Skaith, but
if there's a lethal, yeah, he's maybe he's got some great strength we don't know about.
Yeah.
Maybe some fighter's ferocity.
Oh,
what else do you want to? We'll get there.
Do you want to talk about that card?
I think that's an upgrade. So
oh, yeah, that's an upgrade. Nope. But stay tuned. You'll hear more about it. Yeah. Other sort of fun cards that got included here. We've talked about a lot of them now.
Yeah, misdirection is a oddball. I think it very rarely got taken. I think in some of the most extreme Mollog control builds, or some of the Cataphrane relic decks, where you were stacking somebody, you wanted to make sure that they didn't get hit with some of the other busted things like Frozen in Time, or one of those that shatters an artifact, or something like that. I think that, but I think that's the only time there's in there. This is one that up and down depending on choose. I'm sure somebody somewhere will use it on me, and I'll be very sad. But that felt like an oddball that wasn't looking for, and I don't immediately see a point where I'll include it.
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's another sort of control piece to put in here to try and keep that alive. As you say, I don't think there's any obvious uses for it, but I mean, you never know. As ploys keep seemingly getting stronger, there is definitely some room to try and do this, but I think the real limiting factor here is that you can only use misdirection when a ploy targets a friendly fighter, and then you have to redirect it to another legal target. If there is no other legal target, then you can't even use this. So be weird. If it was just any fighter targeted by a ploy and then you could redirect it to another legal target, that would be great. That would mess people up all over the place, but unfortunately.
Sure, yeah. Any other ones you wanted to? We've kind of covered almost all of them, but
yeah, there's not a lot left. I think the only other one that I thought was, I mean, there's a couple I think are worth talking about, but another one that I think is pretty good and is probably not something that got used enough back in the day is shifting shards. So this is one where you can pick an objective token that's in an empty hex and then move that objective token into an adjacent hex. So this is a little bit of a restless prize.
Restless prize, yeah.
Light. You can't like pull stuff out from under people, so it does help sort of limit that kind of play. But there's also no limits to saying that you can move it into lethals. So you could.
I think that's so. There's an existing rule in the book now. It says
just a standard rule.
Yeah, you can't put it on a lethal token, I believe.
Yeah.
So there's a weird dual thing where you can't have a objective.
You can't stack the
tile
tokens.
You can't stack tiles, but it could go into a lethal. I know when this originally was around, there's no restriction at all and you could put it into a block text, which was a real douche
Well,
move.
yeah, that was people just reading between the lines and being like, "Well, it doesn't say I can't do this." So but I think that having like a hex mover as a standard thing is
Sure.
pretty strong. Like I think we've seen now that Restless Prize has shown that it it's definitely a powerful thing to be able to do.
Hmm.
Um, so having a permanent choice for being able to do that same thing but a little less powerful, I think is going to be a very good option to have in people's toolkits.
Yeah, fair. There's
So
an accuracy one in here. Keen Avarice.
yep.
It's +1 dice to range 1 or 2 and cleave if the target is holding an objective. So both those bonuses only exist if your target is holding an objective, which your target's going to be doing a lot and often going to try to be on guard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty big boost in accuracy against some of these things you're swinging at. I think this is a cool meta choice, and I think it's a great one to have in for that reason.
Yep.
So, as accuracy cards come and go at the start of the season, this becomes more attractive. So, yeah, and nice to have a spread of cards, accuracy cards and control cards and all that sort of thing.
Definitely. Definitely. So let's see. We've got, I think, 4 that we haven't talked about yet. Should we
Sure,
just hit them all since
that's
we've
what we're doing these days.
pretty much done them all already?
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about healing potion being back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so obviously,
Beltari's OP.
old school here. We haven't seen healing potion since Shadespire, uh, but it's really nice. It's flexible too. So you choose a friendly fighter and you roll a defense dice. If you happen to roll a shield or a crit, you can heal 2 from that fighter. Otherwise, you always heal 1 at least. So if you really need the gamble to try and save somebody, you can go for it. But otherwise, you just always have that option to heal 1. And sometimes just bumping yourself 1 hit point is enough to survive another round.
Yeah.
And I think having very easily accessible healing tech is probably not a bad thing for there to just always be in the game. Unfortunately, I do think this helps the big boy meta a little bit more right now than it does anybody else. But
Sure.
they're probably already tripping over themselves trying to figure out how they're going to fit all their ploys in. So healing potion is probably not always going to make it in.
Yeah. Right. They may look for it once ferocious resistance becomes less available. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
oddball is a grievous riposte, and this is a
Yeah.
reaction. So it only works against range 1 attack actions, but if you had 1 or more crits in the defense roll and the attack had to fail, then you get to deal 2 damage to the attacker, which is a lot of damage to lay on somebody unexpectedly. Um, it it's interesting because it's only range 1 attack, so it's not even just an adjacent attacker. They have to be range 1.
Yep.
Um, and but it does occupy a pretty important reaction window. So it's a defensive reaction, which means it has priority, and it's an after attack action. So if you crit out a Snarlfang, then you can Grievous Riposte and stop the jaws as well as doing damage to them, which is a real feels bad for them. Um,
Yeah.
I don't. It's a tough one. I think you might have it if you have one of these decks that like I can see. I'm almost surprised that Glissette's not on here. It feels like right up her alley.
Yeah.
Kind of hanging out defensively and critting out. Especially, this is a weird way where you can actually start dealing damage back when you have formidable defense on with your 3 dice.
Definitely.
Yeah, I wonder. I'd have to look at the wording on Galligan and see if that stacks or not. I think they probably both occupy the same
Yeah, it's
window. The
probably
after,
both after an
yeah.
attack.
But it'd be funny. Like, oh, I can't afford to risk getting damage. I'll go after somebody other than Galligan and get
I think there's already
riposted.
some of that, but
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
definitely an
uh,
oddball.
yeah. But another good one to have in there for seeing the kind of variety.
I think the only one that I'm seeing that we haven't talked about yet is Mighty Swing.
Yeah,
Um, which maybe you forgot about because I've used it on you one too many
Horribly.
times. But
Yeah.
so this I think is a really interesting card. I liked to use it back in the day, but maybe that's because I'm just crazy. Um, so this is the first range one attack action made by a friendly fighter, and the next activation will have scything. Um, Back in the day, this was like twice as long because they had to explain how scything worked in the card.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so being able to turn any range one attack into a scything attack is pretty strong, especially if you can line up charges into weird spots where you can swing at three or more fighters. It's risky because they're going to have a lot of supports, but man, you can completely change a game with this card.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the trade on paper and say, okay, this is gonna earn me an extra one or two attack actions at the cost of handing out some supports, I think that's a fair trade,
Yeah,
and I think it makes it a
yeah,
good card. Yeah,
and
um, yeah. My traumatic moment was you like hitting three reavers with the one rip tooth scything attack. It's like, how does that even work? So,
dice. I don't know.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, this is pretty standard, I guess, knowledge for scything. I would guess, but like this is one of those weird things where if you know you're charging into a group of fighters, but one of them is like on one dodge, you start there because they're the easiest one to hit. And if you kill them, then the remaining fighters lose some of their
right,
support. So
right. Kill them or drive them back. Then the
you
next
can,
ones they get easier. So
yeah, you can sort of game this too. So it gets weird. Again, like big boys with range one attacks all of a sudden are
yeah.
gonna be scary.
Yeah, and there's some weird if somebody figures it out how to wrap it into like combo weapons. There's some pretty uh,
Oh
crazy
my
stuff that
word.
would happen with the right combo. Um, so I
Yeah, because you could
uh,
get the combo reaction off of every scything attack, right?
exactly. So
Oh
you could give
man.
yourself the chance at a lot of opportunities. So um, and then I mean anything that is helpful with combo, thumbs up.
Yeah. We have to see it played some at some point, right?
Yeah. Upgrades. Let's do it. Oh, actually, sorry. One last comment about looking at these gambits as a whole. I really think that it's awesome that there are so many pushes out of the 20.
True.
I think this kind of drives home what a core element of that positioning serves in this game, and all those pushes in these 20 gambits that will be with us forever. There's lots of uh, gambits that affect that, and I think that's awesome, and I think that helps reinforce that idea. Um, and they're good. Like positioning is good no matter what style you're playing. So
Definitely. All right.
upgrades. All right,
Again, we have the sort of standard set here that you'd expect. All the greats.
right. Not a lot to be said there. They make sense. They're easy to understand. That should absolutely be in the core, and it's nice not to have to reprint them forever. And
Yep.
also Mollog on great strength, using it to kill Targor. Like, come on, man, you didn't need to do that.
I
Uh,
mean, says you.
yeah, you already had enough for no remorse. What's happening? But
Maybe he was trying to do crushing blow from. I mean, I know that card's rotated, but
yeah, sure.
have to do double damage. Come on.
Yeah, so I think those are the three that everyone was fairly fairly well predicting to see.
Yep,
Um, and then the rest were all, if not outright surprises, not necessarily. They're ones that I wouldn't have necessarily bet one way or the other where they'd be on there. So
for sure.
a couple more damage boosts, which seems intense, given up how much damage boost there already is in our current
Yeah.
meta. But crucially, these ones benefit range as well as up close. So Fighter's Ferocity, +1 damage on a crit, and Glory Seeker, +1 damage if attacking someone with wounds characteristic of 4 or more. So uh, again, perfect art on some of those. Grundon coming in with
Yep.
the Glory Seeker. They don't care about Glory Seeker coming at them. They don't have 4 wounds that they
It,
can knock
very
it out.
true.
So. So these are permanent buffs to ranged combat, um, and they're damage buffs. So they'll work on a ranged spell attack action or a ranged attack action equally.
Yeah. And I think that that's good. I mean, when we saw the ranged damage boosts get dropped off, I feel like ranged play pretty much disappeared. Like people realized that doing like one damage from ranged just wasn't ever quite enough. Um, and so having these back, I think, will make a bunch of fighters more valid than they were in the past. So then, I think you basically mentioned it, but then the other benefit of putting in a damage boost like Glory Seeker um, is just that it only benefits the smaller fighters for the most part. Um,
Or more
well,
accurately,
it more
it
benefits them, right? Like
right. It doesn't
you,
penalize them like
yeah,
it does the big fighters.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, you'll probably could still see this with the big fighters because they know they're going to be fighting other big fighters, but there's other ways to get that same damage that'll work against
Hmm.
everyone.
Yep.
They would probably take first, whereas Glory Seeker, it's like I just need all the damage boosts I can because I need to take down the big guys. Then
Yeah.
stick these in here.
There's a number of attack actions. There's Swordbreaker, which is
Yeah,
3 smash, 2 damage. On a critical hit, you can discard somebody's attack action upgrade. That special ability is pretty niche. I don't
yeah,
imagine it happening very often, but if it does, then cool. Mutating Maul, where you can, it's pretty standard attack, 2 smash, 2 damage, get cleave or knockback 1 on any given one, and then Dark Darts, range 3, damage 1 with cleave. So just some good utility attack actions to include in there. And some decks are more interested in those than others, particularly with the range. Oh, and I guess there's
Guardian
Guardian
Glaive.
Glaive.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, range 2, 2 damage rerolls, and that spears are fairly popular. So that's kind of that one kind of comes in and out of a few decks I have, because being able to uh, reroll all the dice in your attack is pretty big. But so
yeah, yeah.
if you're on an objective.
I think I think of those attack action ones, the one that surprised me the most was Dark Darts.
Mm,
Um, didn't expect we'd see this again. A nice range 3 that you can always use, and it has cleave, so
yeah,
um, we can't just score off of hitting with cleave anymore, but it's still useful to have a pretty accurate ranged attack for pushing people.
sure. And
Um,
like so many of these cards, I think we mentioned it specifically because uh, at the start of the season, when half the weapons rotate out, you you may be looking for more options. So
yeah, definitely. All right, so that's damage boosts, the standard stuff, weapons, which is actually a fairly significant chunk of these. Any sort of other standout kind of utility upgrades or any sort of other things of note?
well, I think I was mentioning with the gambits how important I thought the positioning game was, and
Hmm.
duelist speed is Exhibit A in that. Um, it's incredible for basically, and what's also cool about it is like you only get to use it after you make an attack action, so it's particularly powerful with people who have range 2, all like
Yep.
and range 3, all of Thundrix. But even range 1 can do some cool things with it, where you kind of charge in, attack, and then shift yourself onto the objective that you wanted. It's a way to get onto an objective that somebody's holding. So if you can go in, kill them, and then step onto it, um, I think
Yeah.
this is one that a new player looks at and says, it's kind of a whatever. And then with more experience in the right warband or deck, this is incredibly useful, incredibly powerful. I love circling Hunter in Snarlfangs. And this is a lighter version of that, um, but usable, in a whole bunch of different factions. So very cool. I like this one a lot.
It's very good. Definitely one of the more surprising ones to show up here.
Yeah, very powerful, right?
Yeah,
Like especially with certain fighters. So
definitely. Uh, in that same vein of like powerful push tech, we also got Quickening Greaves back,
oh yeah,
which is another one that I did not expect to see. So this is one that is a little weird, where in a round you get to do one of two options. Either at the beginning of the round, you can push a fighter 1 hex before the roll to determine the first activation. So you don't know if you're going first yet. Or after the final power step, you can push a fighter 1 hex, so before final scoring.
Yeah.
Both options are very good. You can
Yeah.
do a lot with pushing a hex at the beginning or the end, and you can technically kind of do it back to back in the middle of the game. So
How do
um,
you think this interacts with, or the timing works with the Star Blood who may be reacting after that final power step with a skitter or something? You think that, would you imagine the skitter would, this is not a reaction, so I imagine the skitter happens first and then this? I don't know.
probably a reaction would probably happen first because it's just at the end of the opponent's power step, and
Mm,
then this is not a reaction just after the power step. So
yeah.
like after the reaction window. So yeah, you could
Yeah.
probably do it twice.
Art shout out. Golgotch has got some pretty fly greaves on here.
Yeah,
It's pretty hilarious. He's just
he's booking
hauling
it.
butt with his big gut hanging out in his shiny pants.
Yeah.
So, I figured it was gonna have to be that, or I was half expecting to see a Chosen Axes guy, because those guys are mostly naked. Just have one of them find some pants for a
Yeah.
change, and
Yep. Yep.
it's real
Uh,
good into them, as Zach Newcomb has proved to me many a time.
I mean, it's gotta really help with them getting onto objectives and just adding movement. So
Yeah,
very, very strong upgrade that we'll probably see a lot of again now that it's around forever.
yeah, yeah. I 100% agree with that. Um, any ones you wanted to bring up here?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple other ones that I think are standouts. I will go to. We'll talk Bag of Tricks. It's weird. It's another control one.
Mm, yeah,
So this is an upgrade that gives you an action where you can then search your power deck for another card and then put it in your hand. And then afterwards, you do have to give the fighter a charge token. Um, the ability to just go get any card out of your deck is probably hard to really quantify.
hmm,
This will be very dependent on playstyles and decks as to how good it is, but I have to imagine that there is some super, super strong options with this. And then being able to put a charge token down in some warbands can actually be sneaky useful for other things. So,
sure. Yeah. Um, it could, I guess. It's a, just trying to think of those niche things. Like there's the obvious one with uh, the Kurnothi. Why am I the Wild Hunt? Skate's
yeah, the
Wild
Wild
Hunt
Hunt
likes
can
having
get
charge
inspired.
tokens at the end, but it can help out with Run Ragged. And there's some warbands where once everybody has like Dread Pageant has I think Endless Revel or something. Once everyone's got a move or charge token,
Mm-hmm.
you score one. So this is a way to do that without necessarily moving somebody out of position if you didn't want to. But yeah, and I think you call it correctly. Generally speaking, it's a control card, because those are the decks that are most frequently drawing spending activations. Especially the passive ones, spending activations, drawing power cards, and this is exactly that. Only you can choose exactly which power card, and if you have a fighter that you can afford to lock out, then all the better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like if you need your third upgrade for Avatar or what have you,
Mm-hmm. Oh man,
combos a little bit with To the End and
I
all
didn't really
that.
think about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially with To the End, because let's say you bottom decked your Frenzied Search or whatever, and you can go find it and then draw.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you've got this and Frenzied Search, this can be kind of effectively a draw three. Um,
Go find your draw cards and then draw more cards to draw more
just
cards.
draw. I did. I had a bunch of draw tech in the Thundrix game I was playing, and I think by the end of round one, I had drawn like 10 or cards or something. I had like 10 power cards in hand, pretty close to uh, a double turns worth, because uh,
Nice.
yeah, so pretty goofy, but it happens. I noticed this. We got a little. We retconned Leechstone and
Earthing
Earthing
Stone?
Stone
Yeah.
to be metaliths. I know we wondered what metaliths were about before. Well, now there's 3 of them. Apparently, we had 2 of them all along. We didn't realize it. Uh, and these feel like pure meta calls. So the one, if you're holding an objective, fighters cannot hold objectives in that territory. Seems real powerful. It's just one of those things that's powerfully can counter something powerfully, but then there's ways where it gets, you get pushed off or killed, or the objective moves out from under you. So
Yeah.
um, you have to have a really strong reason for using it. The other one prevents healing, which I guess if ferocious resistance is really triggering you, you can set that on.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it's not terrible. Like, well, I guess you have to be within 2. So if you come in and hit Mollog really hard and then put this on, you're like, ha, you can't heal, and then he kills you and heals.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't so. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are, and those may become more interesting if there's some kind of thing that triggers off a metalist down the line.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, we'd hope that there'd be some reason for there to have that keyword, but we'll see.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's only one other card in here that I think is actually like particularly like interesting that I wanted to talk about. I mean, we can obviously mention the other ones, but I think they started at this point start to become even more niche and start to drop
Yeah.
off a bit. But I think Potion of Grace still has some play as an interesting choice. So obviously you can use this as a reaction after a move to then douse the potion or down the potion, I should say, and remove your move token. Interestingly, this does say that after a fighter is given a move token, that you can do this reaction. So it could be after an enemy gives you a move token. So if that starts to become more of a thing, then suddenly you do have this counterplay to that. So
Right.
that is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a counter tech. So if you're one of the warbands that are being particularly brutalized by Autopodal or the Venom, or by energy drain or something like that, you have a fighter, you just can't afford to have him get a move token. The thing is, you do kind of signal it because it's got to be on the fighter already before it goes. So you kind of put it on to say like, hey, don't play that on me. It's not worth it. Yeah, I think we can, like you said, I think the remaining things are very niche. There's kind of defensive in nature, like Champion's Fortitude for a reroll on a defensive dice.
Yep.
Maybe Worm Spatter, happy about that. Horrifying Armor, -1 wound, but -1 when people are attacking you. Also pretty niche, but maybe, some people are stacking the defensive rather than the health.
Yeah.
Regen. Regenerative Charm, healing 1 at the start. I don't know that I ever really saw those taken too much.
I think I never liked it much just because the most you'd ever get out of it is 2 times that you get to heal. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you have
point.
to draw it in your first
Yeah.
hand to even get the full benefit, because it's only at the start of the round. So
yeah.
I never liked that one a whole lot just because it wasn't very reliable for actually healing.
Yeah. It's an Arena Mortis. Multiple more
Ooh,
than
yeah, there you go.
rounds.
There you go.
Although my experience of that was I just died every round and came back to life.
Yeah, so, that's fine. You just come back. It's fine.
And Shard Collar for when you really are leaning into the Labyrinth boots. And
yeah. Or just any of the hold 2 of like a specific number, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's really going to be the only time you care for this is if someone's trying to block you out from that, probably.
Yeah. I think this pops up only when numbers are important, and even then only when a lot of the other movement tech is not around. But
yeah, and I think again, this one suffers from the at the beginning of the action phase stuff.
Right. Sure. Absolutely. So same thing twice in the game, right?
At most. Yeah.
All right, that was a ton.
I think the only other one we didn't talk about is probably the like only used in Arena Mortis card is Army of One.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Only friendly fighter surviving, +1 dice, +1 defense.
Yeah. My brother did use this in our game of Arena Mortis, and it was awful. I was like, oh, Rip Tooth, you're so hard
Yeah,
to hit now. So
yeah.
yeah,
Maybe Crushes will use it, but outside of 3 fighter warbands, I just can't ever see
yeah,
a
it's got to
reason.
be a small number, and you expect to lose a couple on the way somehow. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, tough call. All right.
I think that's
Well,
everything.
yeah. You want to give some quick thoughts of what your overall take was on this?
Yeah. So I guess generally I felt like this was a really nice set of cards. It's a good mix of different things, and it's a lot of stuff that you can really get some use out of. So it's not like, hey, here's 60 cards, but there's 3 you're going to ever use. Like, there's a good chunk of these that are probably going to get used. And I think that that's really nice to give new players like a set of cards that's like, here you go. Here's your first warband. Here's this chunk of cards that's always going to be available for you,
Mm-hmm.
and go wild because you can actually build some nice stuff with this.
Yeah,
And then because it has some nice stuff, it is still a worthwhile purchase for players who have played for a while but maybe didn't start right at the beginning and don't have all the Shadespire stuff.
sure. And still a nice purchase for completionists like myself who want to
Yeah,
have
or if you
all the
just
new art
like
and
the art.
own everything. Oh yeah, but what I really like is that it's a thing where somebody says, "Hey, I'm really excited about this game. I want to play, but I just kind of want to start a little easy." And then you can say, "Well, what warband are you excited about?" I say, "Crimson Court. I really like vampires. Awesome. Pick up the vampire kit and grab this essentials pack, and you have enough to like." Absolutely, in the local gaming groups, build yourself something functional
Mm-hmm.
and go to town because you have the, as long as somebody else has got the boards and dice for you to match up with, obviously you're going to be playing someone else. I love where it fits into that. Or maybe this new starter set, they grab that in the essentials, but I think it's just a great source of uh, generally pretty usable cards, like pretty solid cards that besides being usable, make you think about lots of different aspects of the game. I think it was a well curated list. So hats off to the crew that did that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And I really, I think I already mentioned it before. There's a lot of kind of proactive movement stuff. Between quickening greaves and all the pushes, I like what it may have done for some end phase objective hold things. Although, having said that, I thought that they're a little bit on the back foot. I did watch my teammate Nick today do some pretty crazy stuff. Whole lot of objectives at the end. Um, so,
Yeah,
um,
it's
but
definitely still doable.
yeah,
And this set helps more than it
hmm
hurts, I think. So I
I think
think
so.
I think that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. We'll have to see how much monologue was helped with some of these, but
Yeah. And I mean, I think to go along with that, it'll be interesting when we finally do see the next far list, um, especially to see like which of these cards end up in there. Because I think there are some that could probably be restricted right away. There's
mhm.
some that are pretty strong cards, especially in certain warbands. They get really strong. Like Duelist Speed might just go right onto the restricted list. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Um,
Yeah, it's tough to figure out. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to kind of talk about with the overall? Um,
I think the only other thing that I think is very interesting is that they chose, and of course this has probably been planned longer than this, but now is when we're getting it, that they're doing this card redesign. And I have to imagine that this is not something that they just did on a whim. They probably weren't
mm,
just like, let's just change it up just because.
sure.
I have to feel like aesthetics and UI of a card. I mean, if you can use that term for physical
Yep.
layout, but um, like that probably had to be something they thought about quite a bit. Probably wanting to try and optimize, and I think it maybe could portend a fairly significant shakeup to the game in general come season 5, especially now that we basically have warbands for every single faction.
hmm
It'll be interesting to see what direction they're going to go in for the next
Yeah.
season.
Hundred
Um,
percent.
so, so I mean, seeing a big, layout change makes me think that they've got probably significant plans to try and hit a maybe a bit of a restart button. Um, So, I mean, obviously all speculation, but it feels like something that you don't invest in if you don't have big enough reason to do so.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, totally.
and to kind of go along with this is, a little bit neither here nor there of how the actual game is played. But I did see recently in the newest job postings for Games Workshop that they have a design position for Underworlds and Warcry that was just opened up. And I mean, until this point, I think the game was designed almost entirely by, just a very small group of people. So if they're bringing in another designer, that's got to be another big deal. Of course, Warcry being included in that role maybe means that they're just trying to make sure they've got some backup, but still seems like a pretty big decision.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I, obviously Daydream a little bit, looked at it. I was like, I could not.
And then
It'd be
have
awesome.
to
But
move to Nottingham, UK, and it's like,
yeah,
nah,
yeah,
I don't need to sell
yeah,
my house and move my
yeah.
family. And
So I hope someone awesome gets it,
yeah,
because I
for
love
sure.
this game. I hope whoever gets it loves this game as much as we do, because I hope it continues to be strong. And I like this development. Um, Before we scooted, do you have? You can pick any card at all for any reason. Did you have a favorite of this group?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I think we were talking before we started recording about like favorite art, and like uh you sort of mentioned how the Pure Carnage art was pretty great, and there's a lot of really good art here. Although I did think it was funny that they chose for Annihilation that the warband that's going to be completely out of action is Magor's Fiends.
Yeah,
It's like everything got flipped on its head here.
yeah.
Um,
There's a little callback to the martyred Magor.
yeah. So I like that they still do stuff like that, and that they're thinking about that. And I guess in the same vein, Conquest has the Sepulchral Guard being the
Yeah.
ones to score Conquest, which would be awfully difficult. So definitely like that. You have one that is a favorite?
I think as just a card to exist, Mirror Move is
Yeah.
my grab. I just really like seeing things happen with that. I think it's so cool. There's really cool plays that trigger off that. So I'll go with that. That'll be my answer. You would think that would mean I would include it in every deck, and I'm sure I won't. But I'll be rooting for anyone who plays it, even if they
Yeah.
use it to crush my plans. So
Still a great play space, even if you don't use it.
yep.
All right. I think we've covered them all. We've covered it
I think
all.
so. That was a beefy one. A lot of cards. So
Yeah.
But excited, and we have a lot coming down the wire. We're going to stretch out some of our warband coverage. We're going to try and there's some great content already out there. Different blogs. Can you roll a crit and Path to Glory have got their hot takes in already, and
Yep.
so we'll see if we can get some play experience with them. And give you that perspective, and that just kind of fits better with our ability to absorb and produce the content. So that's where we land. Yeah.
All right.
If you want to share with us what your favorite was out of this pack, you can let us know at WTHcast, whatthehexcast@gmail.com. You can check out our content at themortalsrealms.com. We talked about what we got coming up. Recommended listening for this was Back Again from Dilated Peoples. That's off their 2020 album. That's 20/20, not released in 2020.
Yeah, not the date 2020.
Exactly. But thanks for listening. And you can always catch up with us on the Discord if you want. I'll have the link in the in the notes. That's kind of one for our greater Mortal Realms network.
Lots of interesting chats going on in there all the time.
Yeah, a lot of different topics. It's kind of fun to ping around and see what people are enthusiastic or passionate about. So, all right. For What the Hex, I've been Davy.
And this is Phil. Well, shall we dig into the actual cards themselves?
Yeah, sounds good. I the only other thing I want to say, I guess it's at first I was thinking that splitting them 20 objectives, 20 gambits, 20 upgrades. I was like, it's interesting that they had a full third of them be objectives. But on the other hand, I guess roughly a third of your deck is objectives, like in a standard 32 card deck. So this is a
Yep.
pretty even split for how you'd expect them to be in a deck anyway. So um,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe not even worth mentioning. Maybe even getting edited out. We shall see. Cutting room floor, go. All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, objectives.
Yeah.
Uh, all right.
Will you have a real waveform this time around?
No, I mean,
Hey, I mean that's pretty decent.
something better than nothing. All right. Let me